Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Making of. I'm your host, Mike Valinsky, and today I'm excited to welcome Vanessa Bendetti. Vanessa is Kodak's Vice President and Head of Motion Picture. She is a key player in our industry, helping to serve today's top cinematographers and filmmakers working in film, TV, and much more. I thought we could invite her on to talk about her background, the latest and greatest at Kodak, various formats, where things are headed, and much more. However, before we dive in, we'd like to thank our friends at AJA Video Systems for all their support on this podcast. If you're working in the industry, check them out at aja.com. Also, thanks to our friends at Zeiss. Zeiss makes amazing lenses for cinematography used on many of today's top films and TV shows. Check them out at zeiss.com/cine. And thanks to Broadfield Distributing. Broadfield offers tons of solutions for both production and post. Browse at broadfield.com. And thanks to OWC. OWC offers some of the finest storage solutions in the business. Check out all their products at owc.com. Now on to the main show.
Mike,
Vanessa, good afternoon.
thanks for having me.
So, first off, I want to say congratulations on your recent award at the ASC Awards. It was a great event. I was there. You gave a great speech. So I just want to say congratulations for winning that award.
That was really special. Thank you. It was an honor to be able to accept the award on behalf of Kodak.
Also, Kodak has had an incredible few years, as we were just talking about before we jumped in here. The Best Picture Award went to One Battle After Another, shot on film. Best International Feature was Sentimental Value, shot on film. Autumn won Best Cinematography for Sinners, shot on film. And it's been an incredible few years. So more congratulations. I just wanted to throw that in before we jump in here.
Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, we mentioned that the year previous in 2025, we also had Best Cinematography with Lowell Crawley for The Brutalist. We had Best Picture for Nora with Sean Baker. And we also had Best International Film on Film with I'm Still Here. And the year prior, we had Best Picture and Best Cinematography with Oppenheimer with Chris Nolan, of course, and Hoyte van Hoytema. So it's been a really wonderful award season for film 3 years in a row. So we're really proud of that.
And I have to say, we've got a little film coming out from Nolan this summer, I believe it is.
Yeah, yeah, July 17th.
July 17th, The Odyssey, and I think it's going to be, it looks like an incredible film from what I've seen. So,
Yeah, me too. I've only seen the bits and pieces probably that you've seen. I did get a really special opportunity to tour some of their production design and behind the scenes preparation for the film. But yeah, I can't wait to see it.
another masterpiece from Nolan coming. All right.
Sure.
So, I want to hear everything that's new at Kodak, but I do want to hear a little bit about your background. Can you tell us a little bit, maybe where you're born and raised, and how your path into this industry?
Sure. I hope this doesn't end up being your least listened to podcast ever. If it is, I promise I'll socialize around my family or something. But no, I mean, not to start my origin story too far back, but I did not grow up in the industry, but there is kind of, it is in my blood. My great grandfather, Ben Hardaway, was also known as Bugs Hardaway, and he was an animator and cartoonist and did voiceover, and he worked for various studios back in the golden age of Hollywood and he directed Porky's Hare Hunt Looney Tunes episode, and it was the first one to incorporate a rabbit. And so then he was involved with the creation of Bugs's Bunny. So he was one of the earlier animators for Bugs Bunny, or one of the first to draw Bugs Bunny, actually. And then I think it was Chuck Jones or one of the guys that said that he wasn't a great drawer. And so they had somebody else kind of refine the rabbit. But for years, it was called Bugs's Bunny. And so I grew up knowing this kind of affiliation that he had. He did the voice of Woody Woodpecker and Yosemite Sam, and was part of the Looney Tunes legacy that we have today. And so I was lucky enough to meet Mel Blanc when I was young, and just knew about this kind of wonderful world of creativity that was the early days of Hollywood. So didn't grow up in it again. I grew up in Santa Barbara, California. My parents were not in the business, but I had some kind of proximity and affinity for it all along. And then I was acting and doing a little bit of modeling in my early years and college days, and came down to LA thinking I wanted to pursue that, and quickly decided I didn't love being in front of the camera and not having as much control over my career. And so I decided to try and go behind it. So that was kind of the beginning of being in production and working in this industry.
It's a great start. So what happens next?
So I was at a callback for a Pert Plus commercial and had to be in a bathing suit, and was in front of some directors who were not the nicest guys, and thought, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And so ironically, my father went to University of Oregon, and one of his fraternity brothers and good friends was Don Simpson. And so he and Don lived in Hawaii together after college and kind of maintained, a friendship from afar over the years. And so when I was looking for an internship to see if I could kind of get my foot in the door on the other side of the camera, I was lucky enough to get an interview with Simpson Bruckheimer through that relationship. And so I started in the early 90s working for Don and Jerry just after they had left Paramount and had moved over to Disney with a new contract there. So they were located in the animation building on the lot. And I started as an intern there and did a lot of research for them, and, kind of random things that come to you as an intern. And then I was lucky enough to work on a movie called Dangerous Minds, which was called My Posse Don't Do Homework as the working title, which was the book that it was based on. And so I served the production manager on that show and worked as an office PA. And then after that movie finished, I was given the opportunity to either go to Miami to work with Michael Bay on Bad Boys, or stay in LA and work for Tony Scott on Crimson Tide. And so it was the best decision I ever made. I did go work with Tony. I was initially hired to help research and source stock footage to create the war at the beginning and end of the movie. And so that was before, there was online libraries like Getty where you could just Google, the footage you needed. So I was actually, reading textual documentation from CNN or whatever news organization of, things that we thought might apply to what we were looking for. And then you'd have to get a VHS screener with time code. And then it was all much more laborious back then. But, and then I visited, governmental libraries, to actually look through material and it was, quite the endeavor. But I got to know Tony that way, and then stayed on as a set PA on that movie. And I continued to work with Tony up until his death on most of the films that he did. And I continued to work for Jerry and other people who I met along the way doing either Tony or Bruckheimer, or collectively Tony and Bruckheimer movies. So I was really lucky to just kind of immediately fall into, this arena of big movies and getting to work with some of the most talented and prolific filmmakers ever, So very different than my role today, where I get to really work with a lot of independent directors and see that side of the world. But I kind of started at, the $50 million budget range back in the 90s, and they were high testosterone, big Bruckheimer type productions.
Well, you're hanging out with some big folks as well. I think you and Christopher Nolan are in cahoots occasionally, and
Well, I mean, yeah, I love my current role in the sense at Kodak, in the sense that I get to maintain some of the relationships I had before coming to Kodak with the people, that I worked with prior, but also, yeah, I mean, I'm lucky enough to get to support some of the best filmmakers in the world with our product, and people like Christopher Nolan and Emma Thomas and Hoyte van Hoytema, who are pushing the envelope all the time. We get to work with them in order to ensure, that they have what they need. And so it's fun because it's a challenge, and it's the part of, kind of it serves my need to somehow be creatively involved still, and so I really enjoy that.
Yeah, and PTA is there's
Yeah.
there's a group of filmmakers that only shoot film and probably will only shoot film going forward.
Yeah.
I believe Spielberg is in that camp, if I'm not
He
mistaken.
is. I mean, the last movie he just did was hybrid. He sometimes will introduce, you know, the other medium. Definitely, as we all know, a big proponent of analog filmmaking and also, theatrical experience and film being a part of that as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
we have great partners in that way for sure.
So related to theatrical and we're all kind of watching that space and how's it doing.
Yeah.
Um, I obviously still love going to the movies. I believe you do too. It's totally different than sitting at home and pausing it 100 times and have your cell phone in front of you.
I, it's funny because we've been so focused on the acquisition part of our business for the last few years because that was really the place where there was a clear path for growth at Kodak, and print had really been knocked at the knees with the introduction of DCP and the requirements for these theaters to convert. But it's been a really wonderful, kind of pleasant surprise to see the embracing of on-film exhibition again. And I think what audiences are realizing is that it helps to differentiate the experience so much from what they see on their phones or the airplane or their television. And it also, eventizes the movie for the distributors and the exhibitors, because if there's a film component to the release strategy, even if it's a small part of the release strategy, it gets people talking about the movie differently, I think, because people are like, oh, what format did you see it in? And also like credit to the projectionist because it's performance art. I mean, it's very different than projecting digitally, not to, not give those projectionists credit, but it's a totally different deal. I mean, and so I think in general, no two film screenings will ever be the same. And there's just that magic of the flicker and the light that happens. And so I think I'm really pleased that people are embracing that the way that they are. And it's, of course, great for the medium and great for the infrastructure that still supports on film exhibition.
Mhm. Yeah, and we saw that recently with One Battle After Another with the VistaVision, and I believe about 10 years ago they had a roadshow for The Hateful Eight.
Yep,
So that I'm glad you brought that into the conversation more, and I hope are you seeing that trend up a little
for
more?
sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, Project Hail Mary didn't shoot film and they're exhibiting on Kodak 70 millimeter and IMAX. So, yeah, for sure. I think, again, I think that people have a thirst for this. And, as audience members, the more you can show that that's important to you with your ticket purchases, the better. But yeah, I think, you look at, I mean, if you go online and you see a movie that was, exhibited on both film and digitally, and you look at the ticket sales, I mean, the theaters that are showing film are sold out. They keep having to bring these movies back, and do another run of them because it's an incredible experience. And thank goodness for Ryan Coogler, who so eloquently explained all this in his 10-minute one take, video before Sinners, explaining the formats that they shot on and that they were exhibiting on, and allowing it to be more relatable to people so that they understood what they were seeing and why it's special. And so it's great. I mean, I couldn't be happier about it. There are considerations. There's only certain labs like Photochem that can service the 70 millimeter component to, on film release. And from a post-production perspective, you've got to be, delivering the film sooner to have a film release. But I think it's worth it. And I'm so glad to see the studios continue to invest in that. And again, titles that are not shot on film, that are still being brought to the screens on film, which is great.
Amazing. All right, so we jumped into the exhibition, but I want to rewind
Yeah.
a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
get into the acquisition, get into the capture. Um, so give us a sense. I feel like there's been an uptick in the amount of films shot on film. Uh, and we name dropped some of the films that have won big awards and all that. But can you give us a macro picture of Kodak's or, films uptick in the last few years, 5 years or whatnot?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've been at Kodak for 10 years now. So I think actually my 10-year anniversary is in a few days. I just realized that. But when I first came to Kodak, our early meetings with the studios and the streamers were not fun. I mean, the studios did an incredible job, you know, during Kodak's bankruptcy and during the period that there was a risk the factory was going to shut down to step up and make commitments to Kodak. So, I really credit them and the filmmakers like Christopher Nolan and Spielberg and Quentin Tarantino who got together to make everybody aware of what was at risk. David Keeley, who just passed recently, as a part of IMAX, he and Patricia were also his wife and business partner were also key to that and making sure that the industry knew, what was happening. But coming out of that, and once, it was decided the lights were going to stay on, so to speak, there wasn't a real clear path for what is that going to look like, and unfortunately changes have been made at Kodak with reduction of, people and workforce and also equipment and other things where keeping the lights on was going to be a challenge. And so we would go into these meetings and I just felt like people were kind of like, okay, how long is this going to go on? And there was just, people were appreciative of the medium, but there wasn't a full embrace of it. But outside of the creatives and the filmmakers, we still have a lot of challenges with producers, financiers, executives at the studios not wanting to support film for whatever reason, and we can talk about that separately. But we tend to really win with the creatives now. But I think we've had this really beautiful, kind of uphill climb toward so much more film use in the last 10 years. And coming out of the pandemic, it really picked up. People, I think, sitting at home, quarantined from the rest of the world, and I think their creative juices started to really get going, and people were pulling out, cameras from their closets and just wanting to find ways to make art. And I think also as digital technology gets better and better, people are looking for something that is more craft focused and feels closer to the kind of way the trade was developed. And, film offers that. And so, and thankfully, the filmmakers that are using our product are some of the best in the world. And there's a lot of people who aspire to be like them. And so that helps, people want to engage with the medium to try and recreate a similar look and feel to what they're, referencing and emulating. And you talk to most filmmakers and it's like, the movies that they're referencing are almost always shot on film from whatever era, right? And what's the easiest way to, recreate that feel is by using the same tools that were used at that time. So we definitely have had a huge uptick in film sales and film use. And what comes with that, thankfully, is our partners in the industry who help support the ecosystem for film being willing to invest as well, and seeing there being opportunity there. And so, we have more labs opening, and we have, the camera companies ensuring that they're well servicing their film equipment, and like IMAX bringing new film cameras to market. And so all of these wonderful things keep happening, and it's just shoring up the infrastructure for people to use film. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun to see this re-embracing of the medium at a much larger scale now. And this year, or I should say in 2025, we sold more film than we have since 2014. So from a motion picture perspective, which is great. And what's happened in this, resurgence on the motion picture side is being mirrored on the still photography side. And so we've, increased our production from that perspective as well. And we're now back to 24/7 manufacturing to keep pace with the market demand. So again, I think people just really love this idea of something tactile and analog and so different than what they do with their phones and other devices on a daily basis. And it's exciting. It's a fun thing to be a part of.
Congratulations on your 10 years coming up.
Thank you. Yeah, I just realized that.
Oh, this is
Yeah.
good timing for that. So let's all
Yeah.
congratulate Vanessa on her decade. We wish you another decade at Kodak to help continue this resurgence. And I think it's amazing. So many people are excited about it. And, in my top 10 films, I think they're all shot on film.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Me too.
yeah, from the Jaws and Star Wars and The Shining, and I can go on and on. Taxi
Yeah,
Driver,
of course.
it's all
Yeah.
old school stuff. But um, so
Well, and when I was still working on set, that was the only way that movies were made. I really, once my kids were born, I was doing a lot more work kind of remotely. And so I associate it with filmmaking, and I really appreciate back in the day when I did a lot of archival producing and I knew if I could get to a film master, we could get to whatever we needed to get to from, a final delivery perspective. So, um, I've always had a strong affinity for the medium.
let me ask a question here, which maybe you have the answer to, or maybe because you deal with DPs and you have such great deep relationships with all these cinematographers and some of the best in the business. You know, you're helping them out so much, but is there like a psychological effect when we appreciate watching a movie that's shot on film, and perhaps even if you go to the theater watching it, um, projected on film, that's different than digital? With all due respect to our good friends who,
Yeah.
shoot on digital, but is there like kind of like something that tell the folks at home there actually is something different?
Yeah, I mean, there is, right? I mean, they're totally different mediums. And that's not to bag on digital. I mean, thank goodness for this technology that's transformed the business and has allowed, filmmaking to be accessible to more people than it was originally. And it's all great. But you cannot compare them as being exactly the same. And you can work really hard to make digital look like film, but they're inherently totally different mediums. And film is organic in every sense of the word, and it's handcrafted literally, in our factory in Rochester, and it's random silver halide crystals swimming through these layers of emulsion, capturing light and creating dye clouds, and no two frames will ever be the same. And there's infinite possibilities with color rendition and shadows and textures and all of that. Whereas with digital, I mean, there's a finite number of patterns you can have within the bare pattern of these, pixels. And people add grain and they add, work with these LUTs to try and make digital look like film, but it's just not the same. And I'm always perplexed when I see these productions that have worked so hard to try and make something look like film. They've got all these, it's like the fake grain starts to look like ants on the screen and there's patterns to them. And I'm just like, why not just shoot film? That was what I was most excited about last year, 2025's award season, is all of the movies that were being recognized in that, award season and that festival circuit were on film and had been shot for well under, or, at least under $10 million. I mean, you had The Brutalist, you had Anora, you had I'm Still Here, you had Sing Sing, you had Last Showgirl, all of these movies were tiny little movies. And they were great testimony to the fact that if it's important to you and if you feel it's inherent to your artistic process and you're bullish about it, there's no reason you can't shoot film at any budget level anywhere in the world. I mean, because here's case in point again and again and again and again, right? So it is different. And I think as an audience member, that inherent difference between the two mediums is experienced even when you don't know it. Both, even if you see something on a digital screen in a smaller format, I think the inherent texture and value of film from an image perspective is there. But I also think it elevates the work. You talk about, our work with these cinematographers, and they talk about the image a lot, but they talk a lot more about the process film drives. And the preparedness it requires and the discipline and the fact that everybody kind of brings their A game because of that, both in front of and behind the camera. So, I sound like a broken record because I've said it on, many times when I've spoken to people about why film, but I think the reason, if you look at like all of the things being created today, film has got to be 1%, if not less than that, of, the content being made. And then even still a very small percentage of what makes it to a theatrical run. And yet we're 60-70% of the awards, right? So I don't think that's by chance. I think it's the type of filmmakers that are attracted to the analog medium is a big part of it. We get, thankfully the best creators in the world are using our product. But it's also that it does drive a process that I think breeds excellence. And then the image itself is just different. So I think the components of all those things are creating something you can't deny, which is, 3 years in a row, film being awarded for, or productions being awarded that shot film for Best Picture and cinematography.
Mhm. Could be a fourth.
I
think.
hope. I think we have a good chance at it, And by the way, it's not even just the winners, right? I mean, it was 3 out of 5 Best Cinematography nominations this year. For the Oscars, it was 4 out of 5 last year, So clearly, both the motion picture industry, is recognizing it, and the audience is recognizing it. So,
No, thank you for all that. I've actually asked that question to cinematographers. And, we're coming up on our 4th year of the podcast.
yeah.
So I've asked different times, from, old school DPs and even more recent, the film digital discussion and how it affects the sort of onset workflow. And,
Mhm.
I don't know, the stakes may feel a little higher when the camera's, rolling film and people,
Yeah,
feel, okay, we're burning
yeah.
money here or and all that. But let me ask you just to push in here a little bit, the economics of this, because people think, oh, film, it's more expensive, blah, blah, digital. But as we know, you do digital, you're having more involvement in color, not just color correction, a whole world of things. And
Yeah.
there might be 5 times as many takes, or I don't know. But can you talk a little bit about that?
I'd love to. It's the most frustrating part of my job because, like I said, we, you know, in most instances win on the creative side. If you're giving filmmakers an opportunity to shoot film, not all of them, but a lot of them would gladly, take that opportunity. And it's really frustrating when very accomplished filmmakers are hired because of their work, and then they're told they can't use the tools they usually use to create that work. And so it's like, you know, asking a painter to do what they normally do and say, you can't use watercolor this time, you've got to use, oils and acrylic, whatever. But it's just, I don't really get it because you're you're not giving them their best foot forward in the way that by supporting the ways that they're used to making their art. So it's frustrating. And I think it comes from fear-based economic decisions more than true economics most of the time. And again, it's just case in point that we see movies of tiny budgets successfully shoot film all the time. And it's just about prioritizing. You're going to choose to spend more money on a location or an actor or a certain, key crew member if you feel it's important to your story. And certainly the canvas that you're going to do, you're going to record all of this to should be a priority. I mean, it immediately gives you an analog archival backup of your work, which has all sorts of value. Um, and it also, like Alex Ross Perry, I always credit Alex, and I hope I'm right when I say it's Alex Ross Perry's quote, but he said something to the effect of, if you're a small independent filmmaker, you can't afford not to shoot on film, meaning that all of the other ways that you have to be budget conscious and maybe not get quite the production design you wish you could, or the wardrobe you wish you could, or whatever else it is, that film is going to be more forgiving because of its beauty. And so it's just going to automatically, and, elevate the environment you're creating, the world you're creating. And so it's the best way to put dollars on the screen when you're short for cash, so I love that, description from him. But I think what happens is that when you're budgeting for a movie, generally you have, the production budget and the post-production budget, and they don't always consider one another as far as the real economic impacts of whatever you're choosing to capture with, from an acquisition all the way to delivery perspective. And so line producers will look at a budget and think, okay, if I can get rid of the stock cost, the processing cost, and the scanning cost, I've just saved X number of dollars. The reality is, in all probability, your camera package is going to be, less expensive with film. Your shooting ratios are going to be lower with film. There are implications of that from a cost perspective, of course, downstream, from data management and editorial time and, DIT overtime to be ingesting all of the material at night. And, so I don't think those post-production considerations are really looked at when people think they're saving money on the production side of the budget. And I also hear from DPs again and again, and then look, I speak, with their words, not my own, because that's not my craft, but that they move faster and that they get more setups in a day because they're not tethered with a million cables to a video village, and you don't have every key department head watching the monitor and deciding that something needs to be redone or wanting input or so I think film brings the focus back to the camera and to the director and the cinematographer. And like we said, it means that everybody's prepared and bringing their A game. So actors are going to know their lines. You can get away with shorter, smaller shooting ratios. So all those things offset the initial investment of film. And so it's frustrating when I hear from filmmakers again and again and again that they're like told, oh, it's $250,000 more, it's X amount more to do film. And they're like, but you're not listening to me. I'm not going to shoot that much. You can't put the same footage in for film that you would have for here, or I'm going to save money in this way, or, we're going to move faster, or whatever it is. And so it's a challenging conversation to have, because I think the ways that film, benefits a production economically don't necessarily happen in that line item, the production budget, and so all I can say is that we know films successfully shoot film at very small budget levels, tiny budget levels. We have people doing film, at 200,000 for a feature. I mean, it can work. It's just how much are people willing to prioritize it? And then on top of it, I mean, let's just talk about the fact that it clearly differentiates based on, the recognition of films on film at, the festivals and award season. So the chance of standing out, which is going to have economic benefit, is also better. So again, I'm here to just try and advocate for people to have the choice and not have the door shut because whoever is supporting the production doesn't feel it's worthwhile or doesn't understand it or is afraid of it.
Well, you explained that really, really, really well.
I hope so.
No, you did. I'm thinking, later take that 3-minute piece and you just laid out like the reality.
Mhm.
People aren't factoring in, whether it's producers or line producers or whoever,
Yeah.
a studio or production company or something, uh, the full the full life cycle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wonder if someone's like, if there's got to be some, we could put together a one sheet like, well, the reality is there's going to be, like you said, maybe less possible takes. Put if you boiled it all
Yeah.
down.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And that's really what we worked. And look, I get it. I mean, I've been on the other side for a long, long time, right? And I get the concerns. I totally get it. I just think, unfortunately, it's like these days, a lot of people in those roles, like if you say you want to shoot in LA, the answer is no. If you want to shoot on film, the answer is no. And it's these knee-jerk responses based on assumptions that are not necessarily really rooted in whether or not it's possible and whether or not it can be an effective way to make the film. And so, and you don't need to hire the best colorist because you've already got, it already looks so good coming right out of, right out of the camera. So yeah, that's our most challenging part, of the sales process these days. I feel like we've got great relationships with the filmmakers. I feel like people really appreciate the medium. They see the difference. It's just about the logistics and getting the people who need to support it on board.
Mhm. You certainly do have some of the best relationships with filmmakers. I've seen it. And I was at the Kodak Film Awards a few weeks ago.
Oh yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you for the invitation. It was a great event, really special event. A lot of notables there, a lot of amazing talents, and just getting the community together. I think it
Well,
was,
and those people can articulate much better than I ever could why film. The way they speak about it is incredible.
yeah. Well, we'll have to put some little campaign together. Why film?
Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, well, let me sidebar. Let me ask you a question because you have a cozy, great relationship with IMAX. I did want to ask you about that kind of synergy, about that relationship, and IMAX is, charging ahead as well. They're doing quite well, it seems.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the Kodak IMAX relationship?
Yeah, I mean, look, I love that team. They're just wonderful people and the various teams at IMAX. But, I've worked closely with Patricia and David Keeley for a lot of years, because of how closely they support anything that's large format, in our world. And then also the newer team there, who are kind of in business development roles and the doc world and places that were kind of expanding opportunity for film. And then, of course, with the post-production group and the physical production team members, who, Bruce Marco and Greg Caccaccio and these guys who are helping all of this happen, here at, the headquarters in Playa Vista. So they're just great people and I really enjoy working with them. But I think at the root of it, and I've asked for permission to be able to say this, when I speak about our relationship with IMAX. But from a ticket sales perspective, the revenue that they generate from the very small footprint that are their film theaters compared to the total worldwide footprint, is a very high percentage. I mean, I think they've got 1,800 close to screens thereabouts, and it's expanding in preparation for the Odyssey, thankfully. But, there were around, let's say, 30 on film screens of those 1,800. And I think it drives like 25% of the revenue in their ticket sales. So clearly film is the preferred, way to enjoy an IMAX, screen. And I think because of that, they're very invested in the medium and they believe in it as well, just as from a quality perspective. And so it's been wonderful to see them double down, bring new film cameras to market so that there are more opportunities for filmmakers to be engaging with their format. And we work closely with them in that development. And we're also trying to make sure that we can engage the next generation and not have the idea of shooting in IMAX be daunting to someone. And so I think, that was one of the things that was so cool about the video that Ryan did, because it just showed you that, like, not everybody understands, but we make film in wide roll format and then you finish it to the various, 8, 16, 35, and 65 millimeter widths. But it's the same product that Chris is shooting for the Odyssey as is if you were to pick it up in Super 8. And, engaging with the film formulas and working with film at the IMAX level is of course different, but not entirely separate from what people are able to get their hands, dirty with in like 16 millimeter and the smaller formats. So anyways, I think IMAX and Kodak have an aligned, vision and mission to grow that opportunity for people to work with the best, I think, medium in the world, which is 65 millimeter and 15 perf IMAX cameras, you know.
Well, you'll hook me up with that when I'm
Yes, when you're ready, 100%. There you go. Yeah.
Um, so I just had a couple more questions, but and thanks again for coming on. This is incredible conversation. What recommendations would you have for younger cinematographers, younger filmmakers, people newer to the game, or people that maybe they've been working in digital, doing great work. They kind of want to play on the other side of the sandbox. What are some recommendations you have for new folks or those people that maybe want to come on over where the water's warm?
Yeah. Um, well, it's funny. I just met this young filmmaker at a film festival event that we had at the Kodak House in Hollywood a couple of days ago, and he's a current uh, undergraduate student, and he taught himself to shoot 16 millimeter on YouTube with YouTube videos, and bought a Bolex, I think somehow, and shot a short film and made it into a festival. And I just love the resourcefulness. And, you know, just speaking to kind of this next generation, all day long at our place in Hollywood, all we see are 20, 30 something year olds coming in to, you know, get experience with film. So I'm so pleased to see the base of the pyramid growing, and ensuring that the skill set to use film is being developed so that it will continue with this, you know, next generation of artists. But I would say, look, we are here to make that, you know, introduction to film or reintroduction to film as easy as possible. We're happy to provide test product, you know, to filmmakers who are well established in their careers and just needing to get it familiar with it again. Anytime we have a production, you know, testing film, for the most part, we're supporting that, you know, early on. We have a resale business in Hollywood as well. Unfortunately, it's kind of confined to sales within the United States just because of an export issue, but we are able to offer recans and short ends and return product that's not factory direct at high discount, so that people have, you know, a way to access film more, you know, at a lower cost. Don't be afraid. Remember that it's the only way that moving images were made up until a very short for, you know, over 100 years. And our parents did it with well, I should say my generation of parents did it with Super 8 cameras and even 16 millimeter cameras as their home video tools. And, you know, it films a very forgiving medium. You know, there's that term that people love to use with film, which are happy mistakes, that, you know, these things come back when you get your dailies that you didn't expect and are sometimes your favorite part, about what you shot. And it's a robust medium. So we are here at Kodak to just offer any information we can, any questions people have about the stocks and what, you know, lighting conditions or applications they're designed for. We have relationships with the camera rental houses. We'll make those introductions for you. We'll introduce you to the lab. Like, we'll use our network to really, hopefully, you know, embrace your interest in shooting film. So we're a small team, but we're passionate and we're approachable and available. And, you know, I would just say, reach out to Kodak. If people email motion@kodak.com, those emails get filtered to whomever is the best contact, depending on where in the world you are, or what you need. And so, you know, we can help that way as well. And if you happen to be based in LA, you can stop by the Kodak House, which is at 775 West Sunset Boulevard too, you know, and we're just east of Fairfax, at Ogden and Sunset. So
I've been to the Kodak House and
yes, I know.
hosted an event there as well. We love it there, and hopefully we'll do another one this summer or fall.
That would be great. Oh, it was a really fun event. I really enjoyed it.
That was great. I got a lightning round question. It's a little bit of a torture question, which I enjoy. Uh,
Okay.
you're obviously a a lifelong film industry pro, and you're serving this industry, incredibly. So supporting everybody. But what's Vanessa's top five favorite that inspire you, or you just turn it on, you love it, or just all time five favorite films?
Five. Oh my God. Okay.
Five
Uh,
because, I could ask you 50 and I know you would give me a list, but we're going to keep it to five today to be economical.
okay. I'll say Red Shoes. It was one of the first movies that was introduced to me as an example of, what cinematography is. And it's just beautiful. And I love that film. Sound of Music, because I watched it with my grandmother again and again and again and again. So it has a lot of sentimental value for me. Um, Crimson Tide, because it's the movie I'm probably most proud of being a part of my career because it was my introduction to Tony and it was such a special experience. And I think it holds up really well. And it's such a demonstration of the relationship that he had with Don and Jerry, and um, just a cool thing to have been a part of. Um, Wedding Crashers, because it makes me laugh. If I'm not in a good mood and that movie's on, like you can't be upset. And then I'm trying to think of most recently, I think Sentimental Value was, that hit home so hard. I mean, I love Sinners. I love One Battle After Another. They were such good movies, but Sentimental Value just like really, I thought it was just a beautiful movie. So those are not necessarily like, creatively or critically what I might choose, but I think if I think about the movies that like resonate with me for whatever reason, that's probably my list.
No, that's a great list. And it's very personal to you as well. And they're all
Yeah.
great films. So what are we talking about here?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you think so.
Come on. Wedding Crashers
Yeah.
is a classic. Uh,
So good.
yeah, and Sentimental Value is amazing. We were lucky to have Joachim Trier on a few months ago.
Oh, great. Yeah.
What an honor. And I hope he keeps making movies for 30 more years.
So talented. Yeah.
So good. Well,
Yeah.
listen, Vanessa, this was an incredible chat. Thank you
Really
so
fun
much.
to talk to you, Mike. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, this was great. And everybody go to Kodak. What's the URL again for everybody at home?
Motion@kodak.com is our email address, our general inbox. But if you go to Kodak.com and you go to film and then you go to motion picture, there are tons of resources there. I should mention that. Film calculators and film handling resources, information about each of our products, the sensitivity and the kind of formulation design of each of our film products. There are also great things called Filmmaker Stories, and it's our online blog. We interview cinematographers about which film stocks, cameras, lenses, they use to achieve their look for a particular movie. And so it's a great educational resource if you want to know, how to make your work look like whatever it is that was shot on film. But yeah, our Kodak motion picture homepage, you can navigate from there to find out a lot more about film today.
No, this was great. Thanks again. It's an honor to have you on here. Congrats on the award at the ASC Awards a few weeks
Thanks
ago.
again, Mike. Yeah.
Congrats on all the success of Kodak coming on back and film, having this major resurgence. It's going to be an exciting year ahead for all the movies shot on film. So we're just really happy to have you on. So thanks.
Thanks a lot, Mike. And I'll just mention, every time people choose to shoot film, whether it's in a still photography camera or a motion camera, or if you decide to, make a release print, you're feeding, the ecosystem that needs to be fed, to support this medium and ensure that our cinematic history is preserved. And, so it's really important. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about it because we want people to realize that, in any small way, you can really contribute to sustaining film for decades to come.
Yep. We want film here for many centuries. So, and by the way, I mean, uh, all the movies that I watched as a kid, whether it was in the theater or on Betamax first and then
Yeah, yeah,
VHS
yeah.
and DVD, all that was shot on film, and so it led to me, talking to you here today. So incredible chat. I hope to see you in
Yeah.
Los
Enjoy,
Angeles.
enjoy the long weekend, hopefully. And yeah, we'll see you when you're in LA.
See you soon. Thanks a
Thanks a
lot.
lot. Mike. Okay, take care.
And I also
Bye.
want to thank our friends at AJA Broadfield, OWC, and Zeiss for their continued support. We'll see you all on the next episode.